Okay, so I'm going to talk you through how I would grade a student response to the Research Methods FRQ number 2. In this part of the lesson, you're going to revise either this question, number 2, or you're going to revise number 1. I think more people are probably going to revise number 2 based on the scores so far. So I'm going to go over this one in the video, hopefully hearing me talk through where all the points come from will then help, and also seeing an example of a student response will help you when you go and revise your own response. There's a lot going on the screen right now, so basically I have the question here. You all familiar with this? And then I have student's response right here. And then over here, I can see this is the rubric I'm going to use to grade it. At the bottom is where I give the points. I'm not going to talk about the rubric too much because I think it might actually confuse you more. But the rubric will be really helpful when you get your own score. You'll be able to view the rubric on AP Classroom, and it could help you figure out how to write your revised for your response question. So this will be here for you to use on the student side as well. Let's get into it. So the question, part A, explain how each of the following plays a role in eating behavior. And then I have a list of terms. Okay, so this is no longer a test about memorization. You can Google all of these terms. You can look up all of these terms in your notes. The tricky part of writing this response is going to be, once I know the definition of drive reduction theory, how do I then decide how it would apply to eating behavior? So it's critical thinking. How does that theory apply to the specific situation of eating? How could it influence someone's eating behavior? So I'm going to get a little creative here, and let's see what the student said. So this student looks like she used SOTAS, the acronym that was mentioned in the College Board's videos, to help her set up her response. So just as a reminder, SOTAS is just a guideline for AP Psychology for your response questions. It's not like AP English or AP History, where we're getting super fancy with like paragraphs and thesis statements and constructing these responses with perfect sentences and spelling and grammar. AP Psychology is science writing, so it's more about getting straight to the point, understanding the concept, but you're not really being graded on your writing. It's more about how, if it comes across that you understand the concept, you understand what you're writing about. So basic principles to apply are to leave a space, S is for space, leave a space between each part of your response, which she did. Makes it easier to read for me. The bullet points also make it helpful for the reader, or for me to read. The order, so she ordered her response in the same order as the question. That's a lot easier to do when you're typing your answers because you can always copy and paste back into the correct order. And then the definition. So it looks like, just from a quick scan, I can see that for most of her answers, she has the definition in the first sentence. Drive reduction theory is the theory that we work towards the fulfillings of our needs. That's a definition of the theory. And then the second sentence is going to be the application. Drive reduction theory plays a role in eating behavior because blah, 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 blah. So this is a really good basic structure. First sentence is definition, second sentence is application. Don't have to make it more complicated than that. And then that's D is for definition, A is for apply. S, this is to remind you to use synonyms. So for example, say that, so drive reduction theory, say that the student had said, drive reduction theory is the theory that we work, or that we are driven towards reducing our needs. So say that in her response, she had used the word drive or used the word reduced. that would not score. So immediately in AP Psychology, that's like, no, because oftentimes the answer is kind of in the definition. So if you just repeat the same words, you won't score, but you can use synonyms. So for example, instead of drive, she says we work. So like a synonym for that will be fine. She'll score points for that. Okay, let's get into it. She writes, drive reduction theory is the theory that we work towards the fulfilling of our needs. Yes. Drive reduction theory plays a role in eating behavior because when we haven't ate, we feel hungry and go and fulfill the need of eating to not feel hungry. Okay, I'm going to see if I can paraphrase this in my own words. So she's saying, it's funny, sometimes psychology concepts are so obvious. She's saying that the theory is we're motivated to fulfill our needs. And she's saying, applying to eating behavior, she's being creative and applying that simple theory to eating behavior. When we haven't eaten, we feel hungry, and our hunger motivates us to eat, so we don't feel hungry anymore. Okay, yes, exactly. Very, this really shows that she fully is like conceptually understanding how drive reduction theory would work with eating. Okay, so that would be the first point. The second point is going to come from external cues. So she says external cues are cues from the environment. You'll notice she made a mistake here by not spelling external right. That's totally fine, especially when there's time pressure and you're typing quickly. As long as I can read what you're writing, or the AP reader can know what you're trying to say, it's fine. So just as long as you get across what you're trying to say. The spelling does not matter. Are cues from the environment in which we aren't fully aware of sometimes. Great. Yeah. So they're cues from the environment that are unconscious, that we don't realize that our environment is affecting us, but it actually is. I love her example here. For example, we associate outside getting dark with dinner and go eat a meal. I love this. Makes so much sense. So when it gets dark outside, that's an external cue telling me, oh, I should eat dinner. I might not actually be hungry. I might not even be conscious of the fact that it's the darkness outside that's making me want to eat. But it's in like a little cue in my environment that's telling me that it's time to eat. Really good. Okay, so the next one is dopamine and the reward center. So just as a reminder, dopamine is like the happy hormone. So dopamine gets released in our brain when we eat food, when we get a compliment, dopamine is released in our brain. When we look into other people's eyes, we get a burst of dopamine in our brain. Sunshine gives us a burst of dopamine. So it's just like that happy, good feeling hormone. And it's also involved in the reward center because we are motivated to do things that create a burst of dopamine in my brain. So for example, if I do really well on a homework assignment and then someone gives me a compliment, that's going to give me a burst of dopamine in my brain, and that means I'm getting rewarded for this action of doing my homework, and that's going to make me motivated to keep doing my homework because I want to keep getting that hit, that burst of dopamine. Also involved in a lot of drug addictions is that burst of dopamine. Okay. Plays a role in eating behavior because once a craving is satisfied, you just feel rewarded and happy. Okay, two things I want to point out here. Oh, I forgot to give. This point is for external cues. So two things I want to point out here. She does not define dopamine in the reward center. That is actually okay. If you choose not to define a term, then your application needs to be perfect. So they mentioned this in the College Board video, but If your definition is really strong and then your application is like, okay, then they'll give you the point. If you don't include a definition, that's kind of like a bold move, and definitely go for it if you feel really confident in your application. But the application has to be like perfect, like spot on in order to score. So it's kind of a little bit of like insurance or backup to always include the definition, just in case someone's like, I don't know if the application really works. Okay, so she doesn't do the definition, so let's see how her application is. Plays a role in eating behavior because once a craving is satisfied, you feel rewarded and happy. Okay, I'm super happy this mistake was made because in the question is dopamine in the reward center, and then in her response, she says, you feel rewarded. So she also says rewarded and happy. So she does give like a synonym there, but I would definitely prefer if she hadn't included the word rewarded, because you're not allowed to repeat a word from the question into the response. Once a craving is satisfied, you feel, what if we deleted that? Once a craving is satisfied, you feel happy. I'm actually going to refer to the rubric for this one. I'm not sure if this would score. Okay. Responses should explain how the act of eating, along with the release of dopamine, results in a positive feeling. Okay, so she mentioned the positive feeling, being happy once you eat. Score, so this is like give the point if the response describes eating behavior followed by dopamine release and experience of pleasure. Give a point if response describes dopamine release followed by pleasure affecting behavior. Okay, so if I could edit her response to make it a little bit stronger, I would say when a craving is satisfied, dopamine is released in your brain, resulting in a feeling of being happy. So I'm not going to give the point for that one just because I think that could be made a little bit stronger. Okay, so observational learning. Observational learning is the process of obtaining information. Obtaining information by looking at others doing a task. Okay, I think this is really nice. So I can tell here she's really avoiding repeating the words learning and observation, which is excellent. She's using synonyms. So instead of saying is the process of learning by observing, she's saying is the process of obtaining information. It's a good synonym for learning by looking at others doing a task. Good synonym for observation. So strong use of synonyms there. Observational learning plays a role in eating behavior because if you see someone eating a certain way, then you're most likely to eat it like that too, or if you see someone eating something, you're most likely to want to eat it too. Excellent. Yeah, so observational learning, I want you to always think back to the Bobo doll experiment where the children were watching adults be violent to the blow up Bobo doll, and then children replicated that behavior. So children learn by observing adults. In that case, they learned to hit and be violent towards the doll, and then children exhibited that same behavior themselves that they observed in adults. So applying to eating, yeah, exactly. It means that we learn our eating behavior, we learn our eating habits by watching other people and replicating that behavior, which is exactly what she says. So she gets the point there. Where did it go? Okay. And then the last part is part B. A study was conducted to investigate the role of framing on concern for healthy eating. Each participant was randomly assigned to one of two conditions. In the first condition, the participants read an article indicating that obesity is a disease.